here's what I see in the first conversation with almost every seller right now. They know it's a buyer's market. They even know that inventory is up. And then they give me a price that their neighbor sold for some 2-4 years ago, or what they owe on their mortgage, or what they need to make the numbers work. And then they say, we'll wait for the right buyer. If any of this sounds familiar, I want you to stick around, because guess what? The right buyer is not waiting for your price. Sellers I see come out of 2026 ahead are the ones who understood the market clearly before they listed, not the ones who tested the market and pretty much paid for the education. These are the mistakes I see most often. And if you're thinking about selling in Ontario this year, I want you to have this before you need it. Okay, so mistake number 1, overpricing at launch. Look, when your listing goes live, there is a pool of buyers who have been watching the MLS for weeks or months, waiting for exactly what you're selling. They see your listing the day it goes live. Those first 7 to 14 days are the highest traffic, the highest attention, the window for your listing that you'll ever have. And if you've overpriced it, they come, they look, they calculate, and they move on, because there are other options. Ontario has 35% more active listings than the 5-year average. Buyers have alternatives. After 2 or 3 weeks on the market, buyers who see your listing, they don't ask, why hasn't anyone bought this yet? I'm telling you, they assume there's a reason. Okay, maybe there's a structural issue that didn't show up on paper, or maybe something that they missed, and that's called stigma, and stigma gets attached and it's almost impossible to reverse. So then you as a seller, you cut the price, you can relist, but the market remembers. The sellers who price correctly the first time, or even slightly below where the market can actually absorb the listing, where it's actually at, they often sell in under 4 weeks, and they leave with more money than the sellers who started higher and held on and then reduced twice and finally accepted an offer that was below where they should have started. Remember, days 1 to 14, you get maximum attention on your property. So leverage that. Okay, and that's actual leverage. And then days 15 plus, buyer curiosity shifts to suspicion. Moving on to mistake number 2, the 2022 anchor. I know I do need to mention it. What does your mortgage balance or even your original purchase price have to do with what the market will pay? Nothing. I want to say this directly because I think it needs to be said clearly. What you owe on your mortgage has absolutely nothing to do with what the market will pay for your home. What you paid in 2021 or 2022 has nothing to do with what the market will pay today. What is that absorption rate, right? What your neighbor sold for in the last few years before rates went to 5% and inventory is at it's more than doubled, has absolutely nothing to do with what the market will pay in 2026. The market doesn't know what you need. It only knows what the comparable properties are trading at today. And if you price based on any of those backward looking numbers, you are setting yourself up for the potential stigma trap that I just described a little bit earlier. The hardest conversation that I have with sellers really is not about price, believe it or not. It's about letting go of what they thought they'd get and understanding that the market that existed when they formed that number, that does not exist anymore. I hope that was direct yet kind. Okay, mistake number 3. Let's spend some time here. It's the pre-construction trap. I think there's quite a few people that are falling into this and that truly feel like they have no options right now. If you bought a pre-construction at the peak, okay, when prices in 2021, 2022, and your closing is coming up in 2026, you have a real decision to make. And the worst thing you can do is make it without information. You have 3 real paths, okay? 1 is you just close on the property and you hold it. You accept that you're underwater at closing and you bet on long-term recovery. 2, you can attempt to assign. the purchase to another buyer, so before you close. But this requires builder approval, and there's often, it can cost thousands in terms of fees, and most people are not successfully doing it now in today's 2026 environment. 3, you don't close, and you understand clearly that is a legal breach and can result in the loss of your deposit and potential litigation. There is no real easy option here, but there is a smarter option, and that's having this conversation with either, a real estate lawyer, absolutely, and then maybe even a realtor who understands assignment sales before your closing date, well before your closing date appears. Preparation is key. If this is your situation and you've been avoiding the conversation, stop avoiding it. The options available to you today may not be available in 6 months. Start early. Mistake number 4 is choosing the agent who told you what you wanted to hear. Do you know how many times I've heard this sitting in a seller's home? In a buyer's market, when sellers are anxious and competition for listings is real, some agents will tell you a number that, they know that you want to hear. And it's definitely not what the market will pay. And it's because it's what gets them the listing. And I hate to say it in this format, I really do. But there is a cost of that optimistic agent. And it's not just the price, but it's the 60 days on market and the eventual stigma. So I'm going to give you this framework. Here's how to identify a truth teller. You ask each agent, what would this home sell for if we listed it today without any changes? Ask, what's the most recent comparable in this neighborhood that actually sold, not just listed? Ask, what would you do if you were the buyer looking at this listing at this price? The agent who also asks you questions before giving you just numbers is actually doing their job, okay? The agent who gave you the highest number, more often than not, was not doing you a favor. They were buying your listing. The uncomfortable truth about a buyer's market is that the agent who tells you the honest number, the lower, harder to hear number, is more often than not the one who's actually trying to help you. The one who validates your price, who says, don't worry, we'll get there, who doesn't push back, that could be a potential risk. And this has absolutely nothing to do with whether they're dishonest or not. It doesn't. It's because they might be conflict avoiders in a market that actually requires conflict. And when the listing sits, their solution is price reductions, which is what the honest agent told you from the very beginning. So it goes without saying, interview multiple agents before you list and ask each one the hardest question. What would happen to this listing if we didn't move on the price? The one who gives you a real answer, even if it's uncomfortable, is the one you would want. Moving on, mistake number 5, treating the presentation of your home as optional. In a seller's market, buyers can overlook a lot. They overlook dated fixtures, worn floors, crowded rooms, bad lighting, because they're in competition. They don't have time to be picky. The first showing happens on a buyer's phone. Okay, I want you to understand, today they're scrolling the MLS, comparing your listing with 12 others in the same neighborhood. If your photos are dark, if the rooms look cluttered, if you have a random shot of your faucet, if the listing is basically a documentation of the house rather than a presentation of it, they're not booking a showing. Of course, I'm going to talk about staging and professional photography. In 2026, it's not a premium service for expensive homes. It's a baseline cost of getting your home seen. And a good stager doesn't turn a bad house into a good one. I want you to understand, because what they consistently do is turn a house that photographs poorly into one that photographs well. And that translates directly into more showings, more competition, and better outcomes. The sellers who tell me we'll skip the staging and just see what happens are almost without exception the sellers that call me a few weeks out asking, okay, what's happening? Where's the traction? Remember, the first showing is on a buyer's phone. Homes with professional photography and staging sell faster and closer to list price, especially so in this market. Homes with good enough presentation tend to sit a little bit longer and could even attract lower offers. And you lose that sort of first week window, that momentum. Mistake number 6, making the buyer feel like they're doing you a favor. Now, this might be slightly nuanced, so bear with me. In a buyer's market, the seller who wins is the one who makes the buyer feel like they found something, not like they're rescuing someone. Sellers who are visibly desperate, who respond to every offer within minutes, who accept the first sign of interest without any strategy or question, who make concessions without asking for anything, signal to the buyer that more is available if they push. Buyers are not wrong to test this. It's their job. The counter to it isn't being difficult, it's being prepared. So know your number before an offer arrives. Know what you're willing to give on closing date or conditions or on the price, okay? Know the floor below which you'll wait for another offer rather than cave. Sellers who walk into negotiation without a strategy don't just lose because they're unlucky. They lose because they're improvising, like on the go. And I'm not saying just play hardball. I'm saying know your position before the call comes in, before you get the offer, and let your agent handle that conversation with clarity rather than any hint of desperation. I want to be clear, none of these mistakes come from bad or ill intentions, okay? They come from outdated information most of the time, and sometimes even from agents who didn't tell the truth about the market, from a market that is changing pretty fast, and sellers' mental capacity hasn't really kept up. The Ontario market in 2026 is not a market that punishes sellers who are prepared. If you're getting ready to sell in Ontario this year, even in say Guelph or Halton or the Greater Toronto area, anywhere in that region, you want to have a direct conversation about your numbers, then there's a link below. Schedule a 15-minute discovery call because I'd love to walk you through your real numbers. And if you want to understand the Guelph market in particular, what's happening in this moment, that video is coming up next. I'll see you there.